they never had such a launch, they never had such a coffee cups and business cards.
Someone nod. Okay. Good morning. My name is Cohen Gerrol. I'm Executive Director of PVBLIC Foundation. I want to thank you all for being with us this morning and being delegates at the 2015 Media for Social Impact Summit. There is nothing that brings us more joy, those of us in the room, than finding ways to create social impact with our talents and our skills in the world of media. Today, there are speakers on stage, but everyone in this room could be a speaker because everyone in this room has an expertise and a talent and a background in how to use media to engage people in new causes, to raise awareness for new issues, and to shift our culture forward. We at PVBLIC are so glad to have you here with us today at this beautiful, beautiful building where so many incredible decisions are made and ideas are launched. We're going to begin our day with an incredible panel. We have Tomas Christensen from the Office of the Secretary General from Strategic Planning. He's a Senior Advisor for Partnerships. We have Nikhil, Chandavarkar, Chief of Outreach and Communications for the Division of Sustainable Development, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and Mitchell Toomey, the Director of the UN Millennium Campaign. Thank you so much for being here. We hope that you will tweet the messages from today out into the world because each of you is a lightning rod for people who follow you. And the issues we discuss today are global issues. So thank you for lending your time, your social media presence, and all of your best skills and energy to being with us today. And thank you to our incredible panel and to the United Nations for hosting us.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you all for coming to the United Nations. This is a very special occasion for us to welcome all of you for this Social Impact Summit, and also thank you to PVBLIC for organizing this with us and with the UN. Let me also welcome you on behalf of both the Secretary General and the Secretariat of the UN, but also especially Ms. Amina Mohammed, who is the Special Advisor of the Secretary General for the post-2015 and Sustainable Development Goal process that I think you will be focusing a lot of your attention on today. Amina is on a continued world tour, and she travels the world to garner attention and to garner support for the process of adopting these Sustainable Development Goals later this year in New York, and we'll get back to that. We also want to draw your attention to the fact that many different people from the UN will be with you throughout the day, from the Department of Public Information, from UNDP, from UNICEF, from Amina's team, from the climate team, and of course from the UN Office of Partnership, which is co-organizing this. So thanks to all of them, and they will be engaging with you, especially this afternoon, probably also over lunch. And they are resources of knowledge, but also of engaging with you on how to move forward. Why are you here? Why is this such a special year? 2015, seen from the UN, is really a historic year. We are celebrating this year 70 years of the UN. Right now, in these days, 70 years ago, governments were gathering in San Francisco at the end of Second World War and were negotiating what became the UN Charter. The San Francisco Conference ended on June 26 with the signing of the Charter, and June 26 will be a day of celebration in San Francisco, but then throughout the rest of the year and for parts of next year, the organization will be marking that 70th anniversary. And at the outset of the UN, there were three main pillars of the way the international community was working. And the main focus after the Second World War was, of course, on peace and security. And the Security Council was the embodiment of that work. And second, at the time, came the normative work and especially the human rights, with the Human Rights Declaration and all that work. And then third, the economic and socioeconomic cooperation. Very soon, that became one of the, if not the main pillar, the end of colonialism and the launch of the UN into global development cooperation. But all of this only really came to fruition after the Cold War had ended, and in the 1990s, when a number of large-scale global conferences took place around the world on environment, on population, on social issues, women's issues, and so on. And this process of conferences in the 1990s culminated in a Millennium Summit in the year 2000 and the adoption of the Millennium Development Goals. And these Millennium Development Goals have been sort of the lightning rod and the marching orders, what the UN was organizing around in the development and socioeconomic field for the last 15 years. And they're coming to an end this year. So in a way, the UN and its member states have been going through a process of looking at what will be the marching orders, the goals, what will be the lightning principles for the global cooperation and work for the next 15 years until 2030. And that's why this is quite an historic opportunity. It only happens once in a generation that you get to push the reset button on global cooperation and redefine what it is that we do and how we do it. And this time around, we've tried to do it in a transparent, inclusive way, also based on partnership. There have been hearings and campaigns, and a lot of that Mitchell will talk about. So I won't go into details, but just to say that enormous amounts of passion and energy have been put into having a global conversation on how to take this forward. And the Secretary General himself has framed it as this being the time for global action for people and planet. So the three overarching aims that the governments negotiating in these halls, including in this room, that they are getting to are clustered around, number one, eradicating poverty with everything that goes with that. Number two, tackling climate change and getting the world onto a course where we won't exceed 2 degrees Celsius in temperature increase. And as a number three, equitable economic growth. And tying eradication of poverty, tackling of climate change, and economic growth together in a package is not a small adventure. It's actually quite complicated, also because this is a universal agenda that ties in both the rich countries, the poor countries, developing, industrialized, non-industrialized. So it's a quite bold and far-reaching approach that we're launching ourselves into. The MDGs, which were adopted in 2000, have helped lift millions out of poverty. And what we're aiming to now, that we're setting these new goals, is to mobilize an even bigger effort to set us on track for 2030. And I'll just use a few more minutes to say something about how we will do this, and then Nikhil and Mitchell will pitch in. So first of all, world leaders will gather here in New York at the end of September to adopt these goals, the new Sustainable Development Goals, with a 15-year time horizon. And they will do so in reaching out also to business, to investors, to philanthropy, to civil society at large, and inviting them to join the efforts of achieving these goals. Prior to the conference in September, there will be a major conference in Africa, in Addis Ababa, in July, where world leaders will talk about how to finance the goals and the means that it will take to get to them. And after September, in December, there will be a special get-together of world leaders focused on climate change, where they will try to get to an agreement on how to curb climate change. Now, you might say that has been tried before. That was done in Copenhagen. It didn't really succeed. But I think this time around, world leaders and their negotiators have agreed to agree. And that in a UN setting is not a small feat in itself. So a lot of process, but also a lot of substance to it. Secondly, we will depend on all these different actors mobilizing and being engaged with their resources, with their talents, with their technologies. So in essence, we know that business as usual will not get us to where we need to go. We need to have a much broader global partnership to get us to achieving these goals. And that also means that we need to have a global campaign, that we need global media, that we need global attention to reach this. We need, in short, to build on solutions with government, business, and civil society all engaged. And that is, to get to the end of my intervention, that's why you are all here today. Because we recognize that the reach of and influence of media in people's lives, including in shaping public opinion, helping to catalyze citizens to action, is needed to reach this common vision. We need this sustainable development agenda, including tackling poverty and climate change, to be at the forefront of people's consciousness, and we need your help to do this. So leading up to September, there will be a drum roll. We need to raise people's awareness, and we need to inspire them to take action to help support this transformation. Last year, when we organized the climate summit, and I and my team at the time were sort of in the engine room of doing that, we had a very successful cooperation with a number of global entities in the media and outreach business, and we actually managed to create a drum roll and to, I think, even change part of the global conversation on climate change. Leading into the summit, there was a massive media attention. Around the time of the climate summit, there were, in the month of September, 34,000 unique articles on climate change in English in the global media. The Twitter social media outreach around the climate summit reached half of all Twitter users globally, around 127 million users, and left a footprint of about 3 billion. So at least we know that on these issues it is possible to capture the world's imagination, and we need to do that at even larger scale this year and moving forward to September and December. So to sum up, in the words of the Secretary General, we are the first generation that can end poverty and the last generation that can avoid the worst effects of climate change. So that's the task. Change is in the air, solutions exist. It's time for action now. And I hope that this summit with all of you today will be the beginning of a new partnership with the UN that will last not only for this year, but for the next 15 years as we're striving to achieve the new goals by 2030. We need your expertise, resources, solutions, and creativity to achieve the future we want. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tomas. In my brief remarks this morning, I'll speak to you as media executives not about 2015, the year of global action, but about the world we want in the year 2030. As media professionals, we all deal with storytelling and narratives in the news, films, TV shows, songs, music videos, video games, and virtual reality products. And today, I want you all to consider telling the captivating story of the world in 2030, to paint a consistent picture through the media so as to provide a beacon towards which the public can navigate over the next 15 years with the 17 SDGs and 169 targets as navigation buoys and guideposts. I urge you to consider a vision of the world 2030 which inspires action and hope rather than despair, as so much of the media products currently do. Not an apocalyptic, disaster and violence-filled world, but a peaceful, prosperous, people-centered, planet-nurturing world enabled by partnerships and solidarity. We find this vision already embedded in the Rio +20 outcome document, The Future We Want. But I urge you now to put on your 4D virtual glasses, the fourth dimension, of course, being time, and accompany me on a brief trip to the year 2030. In the world 2030, world population has stabilized, the demographic transitions occurred, stabilized at about 8 billion people. And it's a world without absolute poverty, where the basic needs of all 8 billion people for food, shelter, and healthcare are met. Happiness has been redefined in terms of leisure and human relationships and spiritual realization and mindfulness, rather than the accumulation of things and stuff. In 2030, GDP is no longer the supreme goal. Economic growth is adjusted for environmental damage and for social harm. Environmental costs are internalized in decision-making. Costs of growth to health and well-being enter into the accounts. In 2030, all communities are prepared for and resilient to natural disasters. Even in the case of the recent disaster in Nepal, the head of the UN for disaster risk reduction pointed out that the plan in place since 2009 greatly reduced the loss of life. Well, here in 2030, all societies in this vision would be prepared for and resilient to natural disasters. In 2030, global temperature rise has been contained to 2 degrees Celsius. The world of 2030 is powered by renewable energy with drastically reduced greenhouse gases. In 2030, circular economies with reduced use, the recovery and recycling of materials eliminates the needs for wars over oil, gas, and other natural resources. Lifestyles are transformed by technology and more centered on local communities rather than long-distance global exchanges with shorter supply chains. Infrastructure follows suit. In the world of 2030, most people live and work in smart cities and green buildings. Technology greatly reduces the need to commute and transforms the nature of work. Entrepreneurs outnumber classic workers. Traditional unemployment is replaced by portfolios of work. People retrain and reinvent themselves continually. They seek skills for life rather than jobs for life. Hunger is eliminated through a second, truly green revolution in sustainable agriculture. There is 3D printing of food from organic natural substances, among other technologies. In 2030, people live in harmony with nature. The total environmental footprint of humanity is no longer 1.5, but 1. We consume, in other words, within the annual regenerative capacity of the Earth. We're currently consuming 1.5 Earths to live the way we do. Fish stocks are restored. Endangered species thrive once again. That's happened with the bison and buffalo in the US. As you know, they were almost, at the turn of the 20th century, almost extinction. They run on the Great Plains once again. That can be done for all the others, for the tigers. Biodiversity is recovered and desertification turned back. In 2030, partnership and solidarity prevails. Philanthropy has become the norm. Great fortunes voluntarily wind up in great foundations, and extremes of inequality are a thing of the past. This, in broad brushstrokes, is the vision I propose to you for the year 2030. I encourage you to portray it in a way that is entertaining, inspiring, increases your Nielsen ratings and viewership, listenership and page views and downloads. I urge you to do it without appealing to fear, violence, blood, and gore, and to show that the story does not need to bleed in order to lead. This vision for the year 2030 can educate a generation to achieve the 17 SDGs and 169 goals. Media has an essential role to play in concentrating hearts and minds on this overall goal of a better, more just, peaceful, and inclusive world for the year 2030. The key words are people, planet, prosperity, peace and justice, both within countries, nationally and internationally, and partnership. Together, you as media executives and we in the UN, working with the media and the messaging, can project this world to the public. Let's do it together.
It's quite a vision. It's exciting to hear talk like that, and I think we all come to the UN with a feeling of getting back to the purpose and the core values of humanity. Tomas mentioned the charter written 70 years ago that starts with the phrase, "We the peoples." And we've come back to that phrase over and over again when thinking about where to go with this new agenda. Maybe I can give you the origin story of these goals to kind of frame it as maybe a trailer in the parlance of the music or the movie industry. 15 years ago, there was a set of goals called the Millennium Development Goals. Excellent goals, well established, well thought through by experts, And they did become the framework for development for international assistance and governmental activity over the past 15 years. But it was a struggle to get citizens, people engaged and involved. And unfortunately, even after 15 years, there's a great deal of a lack of awareness of those important goals. So about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a call to action from the Secretary General and member states to change how this set of goals was determined and make this the most inclusive process for deciding what these goals should be ever, to crowdsource the next goals. So we tried everything in the UN system and with partners, and over the past 3 years, we've met with citizens in 194 countries. We've had face-to-face meetings, focus group type style. We've done citizen surveys where millions of people have participated and done an enormous amount of groundwork to come to the point where we found citizen support for a wide variety of goals. And the original exercise was likely intended to come up with a short list, much like the MDGs, 7 or 8 goals that would define the next 15 years. But in fact, citizens, when asked, they wanted a lot of different things. And they wanted not only the basics, food and education, health, they wanted better government. And they wanted tackling inequalities. They wanted addressing climate change and planetary boundaries. These are all things that come up as policy questions, but it was quite revealing for those deciding on what these goals should actually be, that citizens were quite engaged with all of them. So here we are with 17 goals, which reflect almost the entire expanse of what you might think of when you think of international development or human development. It's overwhelming, but it's also big enough for the world. And I think we have seen that everyone wants to get engaged, not only in deciding what these goals are, but in making them happen. So popularizing the goals has started by this inclusive exercise, but I think it's only scratching the surface. But what it does do is it provides a great starting point to say, these are the people's goals. These goals were determined by the people of the world, not by governments, not by policy experts hidden in rooms, perhaps like this, in corners of the world where such things have normally been decided. But we start with an amazing head start and a great narrative to carry this forward. So I think that getting back to that charter of we the peoples, we find that this could be a very important starting point for this communication. We have already some amazing creative inputs that are being designed and developed this year to professionalize and bring beautiful design and beautiful conceptual work to these goals. I think all of the great pieces are in place. Wonderful partners helping the Public Foundation and others getting involved at this stage gives us confidence that not only getting to September with a major public awareness moment, but also carrying it forward down to the local communities and villages around the world over the next few years of getting this goal set in the minds of people and saying, this is what we get, but we only get it if we work for it together. We can't ask the governments to do all this. This takes a change in our approach to the private sector work, how we campaign around issues, how we behave individually, and how we compel our government to behave as well. So it's an exciting moment, and I'm here to tell you that there is a great deal of citizen willingness to engage. People are looking for purpose, and this is a framework around which to frame purposeful messages. And thank you very much for your participation today. We'll be in the afternoon with roundtables where you can visit and go into more detail on some of the activities that we're already doing, and we need your help. So thanks for being here.
Gentlemen, we're now going to kick off into a case study, but again, please, a round of applause if you guys knew what these guys deal with every day. Incredible, gentlemen.